Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. First of all, I have to give a gigantic thank you to all of you who participated in the chat of 12 operas I couldn't live without chat talk thing list, because the lists that you provided were just wonderful. I mean, it was a joy for me to look and see that there's so many people who aren't necessarily like opera crazies, but who have a very thoughtful and productive relationship with great operas. And it was so much fun looking at some of the unusual pieces, the ones that you don't think about all the time popping up. And I mean, really, what a wonderful audience you are, and discerning listeners. I mean, it really made me feel good. So we're going to do more of those things I couldn't live without. And you can tell me what you can't live without, because I think we're going to have some phenomenal lists that future generations will be able to look through and find inspiration in. Although the only thing I would suggest is that you do learn to count to 12, because I know it's hard and I know there's billions more you could have put, but 12 is 12. And I'm deleting things that are not 12 by and large, because that's the deal. Anyway, we'll get to those. We're going to get to those. And so just hang in there. I've got another one coming. It's not going to be 12, actually. It's going to be, I think, 16, but we'll deal with that in a day or two. In the meantime, there was another request that I had that I was very, very happy to fulfill, because it was a very interesting and smart topic. Great recordings outside the performer's Fach. In other words, you wouldn't expect them to do such wonderful work in music that's really outside their generally perceived field of expertise. And so I call it great recordings outside their conductor's usual expertise. We'll call it that because it makes it clear what it is. And I did conductors. I started with conductors. We might be able to do pianists or violinists or other things as well, depending on how this one goes. But it was fun to do. And some of these recordings we've talked about before, but it made sense to gather them all up in a list so that you can have them in a clump and sample them yourself that way, rather than having to dig around and through almost 5,000 now videos and find the individual videos wherever they may be. So here we have 12 great recordings that were way outside their conductor's usual expertise. Number 1, Poulenc, the Concert Champêtre. You love the Concert Champêtre, don't you? I mean, it's just so beautiful and fabulous and fun to listen to. And I mean, it's adorable. And it's the recording, really the best one, I think, in many respects, with Kurt Sanderling conducting. Kurt Sanderling, oh my God, with the Czech Philharmonic. Zuzana Růžičková is the harpsichordist, who's amazing. But down below, I only list him because we expect Růžičková to be able to play it, but him to conduct it? Of course, as you might expect, it's a deadly serious Germanic approach, but it's so pointed and sharp. And in a way, the piece is all the more insouciant and funny and fluffy and enjoyable when you play it with complete seriousness. It's the conviction that carries it over with the sharp acerbic sonorities of the Czech Philharmonic. What an amazing performance that's totally unexpected. I mean, completely, totally unexpected. Next, Haydn's Paris Symphonies with Herbert von Karajan and the Berlin Philharmonic on Deutsche Grammophon. He went on to do the London Symphonies as well, performances that were heavier and slower and soggier. But these Paris Symphonies were a knockout. Big band Haydn that really, really worked. I mean, the Paris Symphonies seemed to do very well when played that way, particularly well when played that way. The London Symphonies are trickier. Not that they're not bigger, but that they're just so much more diverse and so much more what they are. You have to penetrate the peculiar Haydn style. But these Paris Symphonies were written for an enormous orchestra that Haydn never heard. So they were a gift to performers who don't usually do Haydn symphonies. If you have a big orchestra that Haydn didn't hear and you just play the crap out of them, but boy, they work well, and they do here. It was a shocker because Karajan was never known for his work in the classical area, certainly not for his Haydn, aside from that creation with, which he did twice, actually. I mean, the couple choral things. But this is a fabulous set of Paris symphonies with the orchestra really, really playing out. You hear trumpets, you hear timpani. The woodwinds aren't completely obliterated. It's really a splendid, splendid set, and I never saw it coming. I don't think anybody did. I really don't. So that's worth considering. Next, the Brahms symphonies with Solti. I mean, this was also a bit of a shocker. Because, Solti is known for doing Mahler and Bruckner and huge things with tons of brass and uninhibited, Strauss, uninhibited sonic predilections because nobody could accuse Solti of subtlety. He was kind of a slash and burn kind of conductor, and he could be tremendously exciting. But Brahms is so ultra sophisticated and requires, great sensitivity and attention to things like balance and texture. And Solti turned in a dynamite Brahms cycle with an excellent third. The symphony everybody screws up, and he did not screw it up. I mean, it's a very consistent cycle, beautifully played, very nicely recorded. It is a real feather in his cap. And I think a corrective to people who think that he was nothing but a butcher with a baton. He could do amazing things, and he does in this set of Brahms symphonies. I was really, really impressed, and you would be too. Interestingly, he did not re-record the Brahms symphonies all over the place. This may have been a special project, and he may have known it. I'm curious about that. He wasn't eager to just go do it all over over and over again like he did so much other stuff. This was a one-off and a brilliant one, absolutely brilliant. Next, Mahler, Symphony No. 2, The Resurrection with Herbert Blomstedt, the San Francisco Symphony on Decca. Blomstedt has never been known as a Mahlerian. I mean, he just recorded, with the Gewandhaus or Bamberg or I don't know, somewhere, for somebody, a Mahler Ninth that was incredibly tepid and undercharacterized. I mean, he just doesn't have the gumption for Mahler most of the time, although he did wonderful Richard Strauss, but that's a different thing. It's interesting, because Richard Strauss, you make it on technical finish. Mahler, you have to have the emotional conviction and a kind of theatricality that even Strauss, who was an opera conductor, of course, didn't have, that Mahler really did have, especially in the symphonic context. Blomstedt is a sober, incredibly musical conductor. He's wonderful in the Scandinavian repertoire, Sibelius and Nielsen and that kind of stuff. But he isn't the kind of guy to let it all hang out. And he's even been on record as talking about how, Bernstein vulgarized Mahler, bloopity, bloopity, bloop, and all of that bullshit that the people who can't do it as well as Bernstein did say about him. But he turned in a dynamite Mahler too. He was helped in no small degree by having the San Francisco Symphony, which he had playing at really a very, very high level, and an orchestra which is not, by its nature, going to underplay Mahler. The American orchestras, particularly, they do all kinds of later stuff. They don't, they're not like, the European orchestras that, did nothing but play Beethoven and Schumann and Mendelssohn their whole lives. And so they see Mahler and go like, oh, mercy, Maud, what's that? They can handle it. So they just did a bang up job. First rate, incredible, and one off as well, because Blomstedt has never done any other Mahler since then that was anything like as good or comparable as this particular Second Symphony. But it's amazing. It's one of the best. It really is. Next, Smetana's Vlast with Nikolaus Harnoncourt and the Vienna Philharmonic. I mean, Harnoncourt is Harnoncourt. You never know what you're going to get. He should be really good at this because he is one of those Central European guys. And later in his career, he started doing Dvořák and, Brahms and all of that other stuff with varying degrees of success. His Dvořák was very good. His tone poems, and he did the piano concerto, and he did the last three symphonies, and mostly the seventh was weird, but the others were terrific. And so, he was, I think, comfortable in that Czech repertoire. And this is one of the great and most interesting vlasts. It begins with a much more, what you might call, delicate sensibility. It doesn't go all out for the heroics immediately. It builds. Harnoncourt really sees the work whole, and Tabor and Blomstedt, the last two tone poems, which are usually the dullest or the ones that you sort of want to get through, are really exciting and really powerful because the piece culminates that way. He doesn't downplay anything else, earlier, but there's a genuine point of view because it's Harnoncourt, and this time the point of view works. It's one of his finest late recordings, and a really first-class interpretation of a work that is proprietary, if any work is, among Czech conductors and people like that. And there was also another great vlast with Pavel Berglund. So it's doable. Others have done it. But this is a wonderful performance and totally unexpected from Harnoncourt, the period instrument guru guy, So that was fun. Sibelius, Symphony No. 2, with Paul Paray and the Detroit Symphony on Mercury Living Presence. Oh, I remember vividly when Wilma Cozart Fine was originally doing these Mercuries. They've all been decoupled, all these wonderful couplings she put out. She wanted to give you maximum value for your money. And so she coupled, what was the Sibelius second was coupled to, I think, Rachmaninoff's second. It was like an 80-some-odd minute CD. Paray did everything quickly. Or maybe it was coupled to the Symphonie Fantastique. I don't know. They were amazing couplings, the Franck D minor. She was putting these things that were all issued separately as individual albums on one disc so that you got your money's worth at mid-price. Those were the days. Now, of course, you have the boxes and everything's been decoupled and original jacketed and all that stuff, which, some people may like too. But I loved those bountiful mid-price compact discs, and she was so proud of herself, especially the one that had like Sibelius 2 and Rachmaninoff 2, if that's what it was. It may have been Franck D minor and Rachmaninoff 2, but they were wonderful. Whatever they had, they were wonderful. I've got the actual disc sitting downstairs somewhere, but in any case, Paul Paray did conduct just about everything very quickly. He was a zippy guy, and this Sibelius 2 is one of the fastest ever, and it really tells all the people who play it today what's wrong with their interpretations. You may not want to do it quite as quickly as Paray does, excuse me, but it's the right idea. It's fresh, it's alive, it's alert, it's just dynamite. So yeah, and Paray, of course, was the French guy. Nobody ever thought of him as somebody who would do Sibelius. But he did, and he did it extremely excitingly and powerfully. So that's great. Oh, the Bruckner 8 next. Yeah, Bruckner 8 with Pierre Boulez. Really? Who could have possibly expected that to be as good as it is? And it's a wonderful performance. And it was with Vienna, and it was recorded in St. Florian, like Brucknerville, in his own monastery. And Boulez swooped in and conducted it absolutely to the manner born. He couldn't have done it in his earlier days, I don't think. I think he would have been far too ideologically opposed to the concept. But it's a beautiful performance. And it really begs the question of what does it take to do spirituality in music? Because Boulez did not have a shred of spirituality anywhere in his organism. And yet here we have a Bruckner 8, which is full of atmosphere and mystery. And is it because of the Vienna Philharmonic? Is it because of the acoustic? Or did Boulez just have a lapse? I don't know. Whatever reason, he did a tremendous Bruckner 8. Next, another little stay in Austria. Well, Austrian music. Schubert, Symphony No. 9, The Great, with Leonard Bernstein, on Deutsche Grammophon with the Concertgebouw. Bernstein doesn't get credit for so much fabulous work that he did. He was sensational in Schumann. He was sensational with Mendelssohn. I mean, those Israel Philharmonic Mendelssohn recordings on Deutsche Grammophon are fantastic. His Schumann cycles, both of them, are first class. And these Schubert performances, we talk about Zell and Munch and, the great Schubert 9 people. Bernstein's Schubert 9 is as good as anybody. And for all of the reasons that Bernstein is usually castigated, in other words, he's not interventionist. He keeps it moving. It's incredibly musical. It's sensitive. It doesn't have any strange agogic mannerisms. He's not emoting all over the place. The music, also his recordings of Symphonies 5 and 8 in this same series, the music just flows effortlessly. And he's making music with great musicians, and they're having a terrific time, and they sound amazing, and it's really a great Schubert Ninth. It's a great symphony. It's the great symphony, right? And nobody mentions it. Nobody mentions it because in order to really give it a fair appraisal, you would have to credit Bernstein for not being the punching bag for excess emotionalism that people like to claim when they talk about his performances without, quite frankly, having heard them with any kind of sympathy whatsoever. He's so often prejudged. And this is a wonderful example of just, how wrong everybody can be, because it's a great Schubert Ninth. Next, the Dvořák tone poems, the 4 urban tone poems, on gruesome folk tales, the Noonday Witch, the Water Goblin, the Golden Spinning Wheel, and the Wood Dove. That's what they are. With, believe it or not, Simon Rattle in the Berlin Philharmonic on Warner. Shock, 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 shock. Yes, Simon Rattle, actually, you're talking about things that are outside the composer's expertise. Well, as far as I know, Simon Rattle has no expertise. He just does things. And some of them are good and some of them are horrible. He was fabulous, for example, in Szymanowski, which was also totally unexpected. But we've talked about that one a lot. This we have talked about less. Who would have guessed that they would even do this music? It was a smart choice because they haven't been recorded to death. It was a good idea to give the Berlin Philharmonic something that's fun to play, that they hadn't done a billion times, and which really allows them to dig into the music and savor its richness of color. And they didn't have to be hypercritical of whatever Rattle was doing. I'm sure that 9 times out of 10, when Rattle was doing stuff with them that they'd done before, they were playing along and going, it's like, what's this guy doing? And so it was a wonderful occasion where everything seemed to go right. They're vivid, exciting, shapely, fresh, and gorgeously played and beautifully recorded performances of music that you never would have guessed they would even do, let alone do so well. Yay. After that, the Nielsen Symphony No. 4, of course, Le Jean Martinon and the Chicago Symphony. Everyone talks about this one. Everybody knows it's one of the great Nielsen 4s, and it was done, at a time when there weren't that many Nielsen inextinguishable symphonies buzzing around. They were few and far between, and there were some really bad ones like Bernstein's, which was horrible. It was kind of interesting. Then Martinon just swooped into Chicago, and during his brief tenure there as music director. How they decided to do this one, I have no idea. And they nail it. I mean, the Chicago Symphony, of course, is a fabulous orchestra to do the piece, because they have like the brass and, the timpani pounding away and whatnot. But Martinon proves himself to be a tremendously effective interpreter of the work. It's a slash and burn, exciting, powerful interpretation, brilliantly recorded, really, really marvelous. And another one of those sort of, that was a cult recording because it didn't last in the catalog long either. And then it was issued like RCA Navigator and crappy sound with a pause between the slow movement and the finale when they're supposed to be, attacca and run into each other. They fixed that. I take a little bit of credit for that because when they were doing the Martinon box, I asked Jed to talk to Robert Russ or whoever was handling it over at Sony and said, don't forget to put the last two movements back together. Maybe they did it anyway. I don't know. But I know that there was some input there. Anyway, the point is that it's a genius interpretation by a conductor who was known, to the extent he was known at all, for doing Debussy and Ravel, who are as far away from Nielsen as you're likely to get. So that was lots of fun. And then, oh yes, one of my all-time faves, Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring with Ottmar Sweetener and the Staatskapelle Dresden on Berlin Classics. I've talked about this performance a lot because it's gotten around that there's this Rite of Spring out there by this sort of German Kapellmeister guy with the Dresden Orchestra, which is fabulous orchestra. They're great for this music because they have, like the Czech fill, they have that wonderful unblended sonority and very different tangy sounding timbres in their brass and woodwind sections. So, it's not impossible that the orchestra could do it, but that this conductor gets out there and just delivers a sledgehammer. I mean, it's absolutely exhausting to listen to. It's not the fastest, but in terms of rhythmic and emphatic, with the timpanist having an absolute orgasm in the sacrificial dance, my goodness, they go completely nuts on it, and it's fantastic. Absolutely fabulous. It really shows you what's missing in so many other performances of the piece that are, more technically comfortable, but they just don't have the dirt, the pagan primal disgustingness that the music is supposed to ooze. Well, this one has ooze. It's wonderful. And last but not least, a very recent reissue. This one really got all of us who heard it because it's amazing. The Bach St. John Passion with Eugene Ormandy and the Philadelphia Orchestra. It's also an Easter Oratorio in the same set, I think, right? Isn't there? All I can tell you is that Ormandy's Bach is terrific. And the funny thing about it is that he spent about as much time as Stokowski doing Bach arrangements. He made a lot of them. He was intensively involved with making Bach performable on modern orchestras and doing all kinds of transcriptions and things. And so when you might say that that's just sort of tacky or trashy or I think it's fabulous personally, but whatever your objection might be today on these anachronistic arrangements. The fact of the matter is he knew Bach's music from the inside. He worked with it. And that's the key, isn't it? Whether or not, you're a period instrument guy or something else, you need to know the music. It's all about knowing the music, living the music from the inside out. And so when he came to do the St. John Passion, he was as qualified as anybody to give us a great Bach Passion. He really was. It's just that nobody knew it. And it's been out of print for 100 million years. And he'd also done things like, the Messiah with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and things that people kind of pointed at and went, ha, ha, ha. That's like, early, mid-20th century, 1950s and 60s American Baroque, that sort of awful approximation of what, these composers really intended. But this Bach's St. John is phenomenal. It's beautifully sung. It's beautifully paced. It is gorgeously played. It's astonishing, absolutely astonishing and wholly unexpected. But maybe not when you take a closer look and you sort of view things, honestly and impartially. So there you have it, my friends. 12 recordings, amazing recordings that are far outside their conductor's usual expertise. You may have some that you want to mention too. Feel free to kick in your own selections and keep on listening. Thanks for joining me. Take care.